Well, guys, it's another new day in the shop, and man, I would not have imagined that trying out an old farmer hack would break the internet the way it did, but here we are. So that video with toilet bowl cleaner in the transmission got about 11 billion comments, and I can't possibly address all of them, but there was a few of them that were pretty good, and some of them that were kind of insulting, but I took a smattering of them, put them up on the whiteboard, and we're going to try to address some of them to start this video out. Alright, so here's what I boiled out of the comments that I want to kind of touch on. And because this was all kind of mixed up, I tried to divide it into categories. So we've got comments regarding rust removal, comments regarding penetrating oil, and then general comments and general advice. Probably a big question is, why? Well, really what this boils down to is it's an old farmer hack. I've heard of this numerous times from numerous people, and I just wanted to see if it would work. What the heck? It's $2 a bottle, so it's certainly cheap. It's got hydrochloric acid in it, 12.5%. Can't see any reason why it wouldn't. It was worth a shot. So one that was brought up several times was muriatic acid. Let's just consult our cabinet of treasures here. This jug's just about used up, too. I've used a lot of muriatic acid. It's very effective. However, it's far more potent than toilet bowl cleaner, the works specifically. Yes, both hydrochloric acid. However, muriatic acid is just about 32% hydrochloric acid, while the works toilet bowl cleaner is 12.5. Now, the higher you go in concentration, the larger the risk of damaging the base metal. So if 12.5% is effective, then why go above it? The other thing is that, I try to promote things that are easy for beginners to use. Toilet bowl cleaner, it's pretty safe. I mean, if you can clean your toilet, you can use it within reason. Muriatic acid, however, that's potent enough where there's some risk. If you wanted to cut that down to 12.5%, you have to obey the chemistry laws. You have to mix it properly, or there's risk of reaction, on top of the danger of the fumes and damaging the base material. If you're comfortable using that or cutting it down, more power to you. However, I don't like to use it unless I really have to. I try to inch up on things and use the least invasive means possible, and then slowly move up to extremes like that. Covered. Probably the next biggest hitting comment was white vinegar. Let's again consult our cabinet of treasures. I've even got white vinegar in a spray bottle. Look at all the white vinegar. I've also used a ton of white vinegar. It's effective, but in my experience, I would say that it's definitely not as effective as the toilet bowl cleaner was. If you're patient, it's very safe, very easy to use, so why not try it? But if you want results, I would go with something a little bit more aggressive. Now, you can get commercial white vinegar. However, commercial white vinegar is nearly $20 a gallon. $18.47 at the local Walmart. I checked just to make sure I wasn't lying to you. That's 30%, but then you're not saving any money. The toilet bowl cleaner, it's $2 a bottle. It's kind of tough to beat. Other people mentioned apple cider vinegar. Another acidic solution. Yeah, that would probably be as effective as white vinegar, maybe a little bit more. I haven't personally used apple cider vinegar for derusting stuff, but I have used a lot of white vinegar. Not super impressive results, but it does work. Check. Oh, yeah, nobody even mentioned CLR. So someone suggested water and molasses at 40:1. This is a process called chelation, and I have not tried this before. I'd kind of like to try it sometime, so I can't comment on it. Addressed. Well, a comment that I found interesting was a mixture of 1 liter of water, 100 grams of citric acid, and 63 grams of baking soda. It kind of seems to me like this is a solution that would kind of neutralize itself, which would cause a neutralization reaction, which would make a lot of foam, but I don't know how acidic it would really be in the end. Not sure how effective that would be. Can't discard it because I've never tried it, but It seems counterintuitive. Someone else suggested hydrogen peroxide, lemon juice, and salt. This would be a displacement reaction, which would probably create a mild acid. So this one could potentially work. And of course, we always have to have the expert comments where we have a semantics debate. Someone said, acids aren't caustic. That's not entirely true. Some acids are considered caustic, and by definition, caustic simply means can cause burns to the skin through contact. That being said, in the chemistry world, oftentimes the word caustic is reserved for solutions that are more basic in nature. Now, base solutions, when you're burned by them, can cause necrosis and deep tissue damage. Bad, bad. Caustic solutions are exceptionally dangerous. Always be sure to wear the proper PPE. Where acid burns typically are more superficial, still not good, but a little bit less dangerous than base burns. Regardless, this is a semantic debate. Lots of people suggested evapo-rust. Evapo-rust works, it's good stuff. However, it's expensive. We're on a budget, and of course we like to promote doing things on a dime here or on a shoestring budget. Always trying to figure out ways to save people money and save myself money at the same time. If you can save a few bucks and it's equally effective, what the heck? Few people suggested electrolysis. And to be honest, electrolysis was my original plan for this. I wanted to take the transmission housing and set up an apparatus to have, an anode and a cathode and just let it sit there and cook. And that was kind of what I was referring to when I said I considered getting kind of sciencey with it. But like I said, I'd heard about this old farmer hack, and for the money, it was worth giving it a try, and it was a lot less headache to set it up. For other projects, we'll probably use electrolysis. It's highly effective. There's no question about it. Electrolysis works. Had someone suggest ultrasonic cleaning.
Ultrasonic.
Yep, I use an ultrasonic cleaner. They work. However, in my experience, I haven't found that ultrasonic cleaners will actually descale or de-rust a part, but they are good at removing dirt and contamination and stuff like that. What will really bake your noodle is that you can take your parts, put them in a Ziploc bag, put your toilet bowl cleaner or other choice solution in the Ziploc bag, fill your ultrasonic cleaner with water, and then float the Ziploc bags or sink them, depending on how much air is in them, and then run your ultrasonic cleaner while your parts are bathing in your mild acid solution. That's effective. Another suggestion was concrete, brick, patio cleaner / etcher. A lot of those are hydrochloric acid. Muriatic acid is promoted as a concrete etcher, and it's about 32% hydrochloric acid. Some of these are phosphoric acid. So we'll jump straight into phosphoric acid because other people mentioned that. Phosphoric acid is actually the primary ingredient in naval jelly, which the Navy uses to de-rust some of their equipment, or at least they used to. Subsequently, someone else suggested Coca-Cola. And the reason that Coca-Cola has any effect whatsoever is that it contains phosphoric acid. However, the amount of phosphoric acid in Coca-Cola is extremely small. So as far as efficacy goes, Coca-Cola, it works for mild rust, but it's not very effective. If you want results, you got to go with something a little bit more aggressive. Check, check, and check. A couple people mentioned citric acid, and citric acid was included in a couple of these concoctions that were above. Never tried citric acid myself, but if it works for you, great. Had someone mentioned caustic soda? Caustic soda would create a strong base, so probably effective, yes, but also more dangerous. Safety on the job is your first responsibility. Refer back to our comments about acids aren't caustic and what base burns do. Deep tissue necrosis. Uncool. Be safe out there. And lastly, I did have someone mention, do not mix toilet bowl cleaners. It could create chlorine gas. Mixing chemicals, that's a violation. This is true. However, before I added that last bottle of toilet bowl cleaner, I did verify that it had the exact same active ingredient and in the same concentration. But yes, this is good advice. Do be very careful if you're going to mix things because it can create deadly gas and it will kill you. Be safe out there. Safety on the job is your first responsibility. As far as penetrating oils, I had one comment that asked me if I've ever heard of liquid wrench. Sir. And of course, lots of comments about PB Blaster, the cabinet of treasures. Look at all the Blaster products. Obviously, we don't like Blaster here. I'm just kidding. We use a ton of this stuff. Also use a lot of liquid wrench. Liquid wrench penetrating oil is one of the best penetrating oils on the market. It is almost as effective as acetone and ATF. Project Farm did a video comparing a bunch of penetrating oils. Check it out if you haven't. It's a pretty good one. Also, if you watch the John Deere H series, I hosed a ton of liquid wrench and Blaster into the splines of that transmission when I was trying to free it up. Had a suggestion to soak in diesel. Soaking in diesel is pretty effective for, loosening things up. Works well, it's thin, gets in places, has a mild amount of lubricity to it, not as much as it used to, but it helps. It's definitely worth doing if you've got that as an option. And of course, ATF, acetone and ATF, the old standby. Let's just consult our cabinet here. Hey, ATF, acetone. And somebody suggested ATF and MEK. That's probably a little bit more aggressive than acetone and not as readily available. So for the average garage warrior, acetone and ATF. Good stuff, works well. Someone suggested boiling in ATF. That's interesting. Can't see why it wouldn't be effective. Never tried it. Not sure how it would boil an entire transmission. Seems like that would be a fire hazard. Only you can prevent fires and always have an extinguisher near. Especially with ATF. ATF is extremely flammable. Be aware of that. A lot of people have car fires on the side of the road because they blow a transmission line, hot exhaust lights it up, boom. So be safe out there, guys. Be sure your extinguishers are well labeled. The old candle wax trick. I've heard this a million times. You heat up the part, you press a candle near the seam, and then it'll suck the candle wax into the seam. Personally, I have never found this to be highly effective. Most of the time, when you're involving oxyacetylene torches to break something free, it's the heat cycling and the thermal expansion that does it. The candle, I think, is just kind of a feel-good thing myself. I've never found it to penetrate all that much. It just kind of melts and boils off. And yeah. But the heat works. Marvel Mister Oil. Oh yes. Yeah, let's consult the cabinet again. Look at all the Marvel. Love Marvel. Great stuff. Use it all the time. And of course, lots of people said, anything but WD-40. WD-40 is not a lubricant. WD-40 is a solvent. Lots of argument about WD-40. Always is. Well, WD-40 is a mild lubricant. It's a light lubricant. It works great for clockworks and things like that. It's a very, very, very light oil. It does work great as a solvent. I tend to view WD-40 as disposable. I buy it by the gallon. Put it in a little Zep sprayer bottle. Works great. The thing of it is when you have something that is several hundred or 1,000 degrees because you've been heating it up with oxyacetylene torches, just about anything that you spray on it is going to vaporize. And really the biggest effect probably is the heating and cooling. You're quenching it down with whatever you're spraying onto it, and then you're heating it back up again. So, once you involve torches, I don't know that it's going to make really a huge difference if you use liquid wrench or PB Blaster or WD-40. I use them all. And like I said about the candle, I think the biggest effect is thermal expansion and thermal contraction when you're applying heat to something. Had a number of people post comments asking what the transmission was out of or posting what they thought the transmission was out of. So definitely new folks to the channel, welcome. Go back and check the previous videos. This is part of a video series for the 1929 Ford Model A Doodlebug that we're trying to resurrect from a heap of rust. This particular transmission is out of a 1929 Ford AA 1-ton truck. That was what the farmer used for a reduction system for this doodlebug in conjunction with a Ford TT worm-driven truck rear for a final reduction of all of it. Someone suggested seal the splines on the output shaft. Yep, that was an oversight. But to do that, I would have had to have peeled off all the silicone that I put around the output shaft and the oil slinger, and it takes 24 hours to set up, and I didn't want to wait for another 2 days to do this. So we dealt with the drip, we put a little bucket under it, and we filled it up as much as we could. Had other suggestions saying to fill it up all the way. I would have if I could have, but it was just going to make a mess. So we filled it up as much as we could and put the bucket under it, kept recycling it as I came through the shop. It is what it is, you know. It's not a work of art. We made do with what we had. And of course we had an air hammer suggestion. I love my air hammer. I have numerous hammer bits for my air hammer, and I tell you what, if you want to break something loose or absolutely destroy it, air hammer's the answer. They are aggressive. However, in this situation, I don't think an air hammer is going to be a good idea.
You sure about that?
Because we're going to break something or we're going to damage the gear. Yeah. However, somebody suggested putting a brass rod in a hammer drill. I thought that was a pretty clever idea. I've never tried that before, but it would be a pretty effective way to put a mild vibration into an assembly that you're trying to break loose. I'm going to have to try that sometime. Had a comment that said, why don't you disassemble the transmission? Sir. I'm just kidding. That's what we're trying to do. So these transmissions, you cannot get them apart unless you get the gears loose on the splines, because the shaft goes in from the back of the transmission, or the front, I can't remember, and the gears load in from the top. So you would load the gears in from the top and then slide the shaft through from one of the ends of the transmission. So in order to get this apart, we have to get the gears loose on the splines. Had a number of people suggest putting the transmission in a tote, in a garbage can. Yep, considered that. Totally could do that. However, you're going to use 4 times as much product in order to break it loose. The only suggestion that would mitigate that to some degree was to wrap the transmission in they said put it in a bag, but basically put a membrane around the transmission, which I thought was a really cool idea. Hypothetically, that would work. Don't have an appropriate membrane to put around it, so we didn't do that. But I'm going to keep that one in the back of my mind for future use. Good thought. What is the trans out of? We jumped the gun on that one a little bit. This one. Trim the burrs off your punch. I got a lot of comments about that one. That punch, I'm telling you, it is a heck of a lot softer than you guys realize that it is. And believe it or not, I grind the curls off the top of that all the time. I don't know what it's made out of, to be totally honest with you. It could be 12L14, lead alloy. I'm not sure, but it is incredibly soft. It's so soft that there's even gouges inside of it just from where it's laying up against the gears when I'm trying to tap them loose. But those burrs will literally be that big after 10 minutes of hammering on it, even after I grind them off. And yes, to those with the hawk eyes, there were pieces coming off at the end of it. Always wear your safety spectacles. It happens. The trans is going to have to be fully cleaned out before we put it back together. It is what it is. I've been using that punch, that soft punch, for years, and I wish I knew. I could send it to a lab, but not worth it. I just know that it's really soft. I also got a comment that I was basically deadheading the shaft on each end in the press, and that's not what was going on at all. The bottom of the shaft was sitting on the plate in the press, just like you saw. However, the top section, I had a sleeve over the top of the shaft, and the sleeve was pressing on the gear face down close to the hub. And the objective there was to use the press to push the gear down on the splines into this clean area that was lubricated. That way, once you got it down to that section, it would likely free up, and you'd clean these upper splines off and then remove the gear. A couple comments saying, don't use the torch, those gears are hardened. Yes, they are, and that's precisely why I've been trying to avoid that route. Gears oftentimes are induction hardened. I'm not sure, these ones being 1929, I'm not sure what the process was, but they're most certainly case hardened. So we're trying not to harm that. However, if and when we do bust out the torches, we will concentrate the heat around the hub of the gear as best we can to try to protect the gear teeth themselves. As I stated previously, I try to inch up on stuff using as little invasive methods as possible to get them free until they don't work, and then eventually you have to pull out the big guns. For this one, I think we're going to be resorting to the oxyacetylene torches, and we're just going to try to be safe about it. Had one comment saying, "You're heating the shaft expands it, you need to heat the gears." Yes, I explained that in the video. Heating the shaft will expand it, and oftentimes when you do that, it self-clearances, and then when it cools, it will break loose. This is the same theory as using an induction heater on bolts. If you've ever seen one, they're pretty cool. Google it. The induction heater goes around the head of the bolt. It will heat the bolt up until it's cherry. You let it cool down. Oftentimes they'll back right out. Same concept, just a little bit different approach. However, once we bust out the oxyacetylene torches, I'm going to go after the gear hubs. Speaking of oxyacetylene torches, had one comment about my oxygen regulator being too dangerous to fix and that new ones are cheap. A Victor 450 regulator from Grainger is $418.16. I'm not that wealthy, so we're going to rebuild it.
I'm in danger!
We covered about 35 of the 11 billion questions that were asked on this video, and I know that this was somewhat unconventional and caused a bit of a storm on the internet, but it was effective. And I hope that you guys will stay tuned for the continued resurrection of this old transmission, as well as the continued resurrection of this 1929 Ford Model A Doodlebug Rust Bucket, because it's going to be awesome. So thanks for watching. I appreciate it very much, and keep saving the old iron.